A strike mandate vote is currently underway among Air Canada flight attendants. The vote comes after the Air Canada component of the Canadian Union of Public Employees wrapped up the conciliation process with no deal reached. The union represents more than 10,000 flight attendants who have been in contract negotiations for over 7 months. Air Canada noted that a strike can't take place until after a 21-day cooling off period, once the 60-day conciliation period has expired. I sat down with aviation expert John Gradek to learn more. John, thank you so much for the time today.
My pleasure.
Now, is there any precedent for flight attendants striking at Air Canada?
Yes, there is. And back in the 80s, mid 80s, I would say, Air Canada had a strike with about 3 weeks, I think, maybe 2, 3 weeks. The airline continued to operate, albeit not all of their services, but they did operate most of their international services with non-unionized staff. So it is a precedent set already.
And just how much of an impact would a strike have on air travel in Canada?
Depends on how Air Canada reacts and how Air Canada decides to deploy its non-unionized staff onto airplanes. In a normal situation with this type of situation going on, the extent to which they can, in fact, offer services, it's going to be a function of the relationship they have with the government. I think the last time we had this strike at Air Canada, we were still a Grand Corporation. So there's a very different mindset and a very different operating plan and ownership and governance. Now, as a private company, I think that the government maybe have more of a standoffish type of approach. Let the parties come to an agreement on their own without too much government intervention. So Air Canada is going to have to kind of figure out which are the routes that are more important and at the time of the strike, and then man those routes and let other services drop.
And how at strike is the sector from strike action, given that we have so few airlines in Canada and restrict international carriers from flying between Canadian cities?
Well, it's going to have an impact for sure. I think that the impact is going to be that you'll have less Air Canada birds flying around. You'll have, but I would not say that we are that short of capacity in Canada. We have, WestJet with 180 airplanes. You have Order with about 50 airplanes, and Flair is still there with their 20. So there'll still be a couple of hundred aircraft flying in Canada. It's not as if air services in Canada are totally disrupted. Yes, there'll be less choice. Yes, there'll be a lot of pressure on WestJet to kind of return into Eastern Canada, where they've kind of abandoned when Air Canada and WestJet kind of agreed to split the country. So an Air Canada work stoppage, Eastern Canada will be very much hard hit. Western Canada, probably not as much.
And if there is a strike, is there an option for airports to give slots to international carriers for international routes?
Uh, Certain routes are going to be very tricky. Very rarely would you have a situation where the government would open up Canadian airspace for international carriers to fly domestically. Never happened. And then there's no precedent anywhere in the world that has that provision in place. And so we're going to have to sort this problem out on our own with Canadian aircraft, with Canadian airlines. So I don't think we'll see a situation where we'll have, international carriers flying domestic routes. They may increase their international services to compensate for Air Canada not being able to fly internationally, which is fine. But for them to fly, for British Airways to fly from Toronto to Vancouver, or Lufthansa to fly from Montreal to Calgary, not going to happen.
And how could a strike impact prices for available flights that aren't Air Canada?
Got to be expensive. Yeah, it is going to change the dynamic of pricing in Canada for sure. And I think that's in the backs on the minds of the politicians, to the extent that they may or may not want to intervene in this issue. Airfares in Canada are fairly high, compared to what we had over the last few summers. So fares are high, flights are full, carriers are making money this summer. And any risk to Air Canada's profitability will be significant. I think WestJet and Porter are going to be very pleased if there is an Air Canada work stoppage, because their planes will be full. I'm not sure they would take much advantage of any increases in fares, but if anybody had any doubts about fares coming down as a result of the waning of summer season, not going to happen. We're going to stay with those fares.
Well, John, thank you so much for the time today.
My pleasure, Teresa. Have a great day.